Hello students, and welcome to the Unit 5 of Fundamentals of Logistics, which is also the final unit of this course titled Logistics in International Trade. In this unit, we'll be covering all aspects of logistics and trade related to overseas market outside the geographical boundary of your country, or for that matter any country. So we'll go through steps wise to understand what is international trade and the resultant effect of it, that is globalization, where India stands in trade among its peers and other world leading nations, followed by we'll be then looking into documentations and procedures of trade, that is predominantly export and imports. So here we're dwelling into a lot of aspects like terms of sales, followed by documents required, what role does customs play, and demand documents from the business firms. Finally, we'll also look into a massive problem existing in the world, that is international transportation. Why I use the word problem? Because every country has a varying level of transportation sophistication. Some are very, very poor, some are too advanced. Given that, the managers in international logistics have to make decisions of reaching the goods. Finally, we will wind up with a cold storage facility, which is also known as cold storage infrastructure for storage of goods, especially after the commencement of e-commerce business domestically as well as international flow of goods through e-commerce. E-commerce has made facilities requirements in every country to such high levels that governments are gearing up to provide facilities, subsidies, grants to local entrepreneurs to set up facilities that eases the e-commerce business and also helps the economy grow. So the topic for this session today is international trade in Indian economy. So first, we'll understand what is international trade. For that, let's spend some time to understand what is trade. Trade is a very commonly used word in both domestic business and international business. When I use the word trade, some students may think, oh, we are looking at trading activities. Trading, by the very nature of the business, is just buying and selling, and in between making some profit. Or you can always say the firm which is into trading business brings the buyers and suppliers together. That's another way to describe trade. Well, trade, if you look at the national accounts of Government of India, always lists as business activities related to distribution, wholesaling and retailing. So again the word trade is used. But here we are looking at a very elevated level of what trade is. By definition, trade means exchange of goods and services, which is happening since time immemorial. Ever since mankind existed, trade has existed. But what is an international trade? An international trade carries the same definition, however, it is across the borders of the country. It is exchange of goods and services across a nation's border. That is what is a simple definition of international trade. Well, in order to see how trade has flourished in this world, it is a very interesting story. It dates back to more than thousands of years. Mesopotamia, Babylon, even Chandragupta Mauryan Empire was very, very advanced in trade. Many nations, many empires have flourished because of trade, especially the Roman Empire. I may take some time here to tell you that the Roman Empire expanded because any country they fought and won, that is, they annexed the country, they would facilitate trade first. Because they knew that trade is going to help the local people earn money and live a living enough for them and their family. And this activity of the Roman Empire helped the empire to keep its colonies under its fold, because the people in those colonies were given appropriate jobs and they were doing business and making enough money to maintain a healthy and decent living. Ever since Roman Empire up till current date, you have seen trade increase many times. So, in order to see how trade evolved in this, or rather the previous century, because our century has commenced now, it is 2022. So, we are coming to a quarter of a century now. However, the real boost to trade happened in the previous century. That is not so long ago for you and me. It is world trade basically increased and strengthened a network between countries, institutions and individuals. The first line of this slide has a meaning that dates back to the aftermath of the Second World War. After the Second World War, many nations around the world saw that the countries that won the war or the countries that lost the war, in fact, both the groups have lost the war. Because every country had lost its people, they had lost the ability of the nation to grow in the future. They had lost their ability to grow any plants, vegetation on the soil, and moreover, infrastructure of those countries, whether it can be roads, bridges, dams, buildings, offices, houses, were all destroyed. At this point of time, the nations met together at a common place to discuss and understand that war is going to only vanquish mankind. Nobody really wins anything in a war. Globalization was the output or the incident of these activities. So let's see in this slide, point by point, what does each statement really means. Globalization allows free flow of men, money and goods. So, after the meeting which happened at a location in New Hampshire in America, a county known as Bretton Woods, where the world leaders met, all the leaders from different nations signed an agreement. And famous economists who also attended these meetings, one of the exemplary economists is Sir John Maynard Keynes, also had his proposal of how to run a nation's economy. All this culminated into an agreement which is known as Bretton Woods Agreement. However, our topic is not to go into in-depth to understand what the Bretton Woods Agreement clauses are, But however, it gave birth to a very important institution that in fact governs the world trade today. And this Bretton Woods Agreement gave rise to what we call today as supranational institutions. When I use the word supranational institutions, I am referring to institutions that have got enormous influence on working of many independent, democratic or communist republics or communist countries and independent countries. So, this eventually led to creation of the International Monetary Fund, which we call as IMF, the World Bank, followed by an agreement was signed which is known as GATT, which is known as General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, which is a very important agreement signed which fueled the international trade. Today, the same GATT is known as World Trade Organization. These institutions, along with the banking infrastructures, international banking that has grown manifolds and have got their imprints on many countries with headquarters in some far-off regions, has fueled international trade, prospered many economies. So world trade has increased and strengthened a network between countries, institutions and also individuals. In these agreements, basically nations come together to sign certain mutually acceptable way of dealing and doing business. In order for trade to expand, you require first and foremost goods to flow from one country to the other without any hindrance and without any government problems or restrictions or regulations. In addition, it should also involve the flow of money. Yes, we have two major internationally accepted currencies in the world today. One is the US dollar, other is the euro, and trade around the world happens with among these two currencies. Normally, it is US dollars that is the most accepted currency around the world, and followed by free flow of people or the business people from one country to the other. Today, if you see how easy it is to obtain a visa for a country and buy a ticket in India, pay the money, obtain a ticket, go to the airport and fly to a country, stay there either for tourist purpose or business purpose or even for education and return after the work is done. This was not true. Getting foreign exchange was very difficult about 30 years, 40 years ago. So every country is in a different phase of becoming a part of a global village. All countries are not like India. Some are more free than India, or some are still leading a very restricted economy. Maybe you can recall, or you may not be even born at that time, but 1960s or 1970s of India. So, currency flow sets the exchange rates, which are the values of currencies related to each other. Free flow of money, that is demand and supply of a particular denomination of currency. When I use the word denomination, please understand I am talking about Indian rupees INR or US dollar. So, the exchange rates, we know today is what is rate, $1 equal to maybe some rupees, maybe 79 rupees, 78 rupees or 80 rupees. The change in these prices is based on the demand and supply of currencies. So, the values of currencies related to each other is also known as exchange rates. Now, there was a time when exchange rates were set by the government. In fact, many governments even do it today, but not all the governments in the world. Let's see, when they set the exchange rates, trade happened due to those exchange rates. But the new world order, it has reversed. Now, exchange rates have begun to determine the level of trade. So every country normally dealt by the central bank of the country. In our country, it is Reserve Bank of India. Look at the foreign exchange markets so that there is no major gyrations that affects the India's trade with other countries. Now, as I told you, the Bretton Woods Agreement gave rise to GATT, IMF and the World Bank. The World Trade Organization primarily is involved in improving the trade and investment flows around the world. International Monetary Fund, the IMF, provides stability to international monetary framework, and the World Bank, when it's commenced its operation, the basic focus of World Bank was for reconstruction. I have maintained the same definition here. However, today World Bank is all about development, like waterworks, constructing dam, hygiene, etc. In India, we have several World Bank funded projects running for the upliftment of the poor and the needy people. So, these three supranational institutions have greatly facilitated what we call as globalization. Now let us understand what is globalization. Well, globalization is nothing but an interdependence of nations around the globe fostered through free trade. Well, there are several words here which may be a bit misleading in order to understand it directly the way it is written. Well, it is interdependence very much. One nation depends on the other for certain goods, so that the other nation which is buying the goods will produce certain products which they can then send it back to the country where they purchase the raw material from or export it to some other country. So, there is always an interdependence. And because of this interdependence, nations effectively have abstained from entering a difference of opinion or political engagement that can lead to large-scale destruction like a war. These interdependence of nations around the globe is fostered to free trade. Well, the word free trade means what? Free trade is when there is least restriction from the government to obtain goods from some other country. Please understand, businesses in each of the country manufacture products. In order to manufacture, their country may not be able to supply all the raw materials, all the equipments, all the machineries, all the expertise, knowledge, technical know-how, everything. This may not be available in a single country. At this point of time, they need to depend on some other country where they get a better quality of such services and also at a lower cost. So, these two firms in the two countries will come together and discuss trade-related activities. For this trade to be executed, the governments of both these countries must have guidelines, rules and regulation that makes a smooth and flow of goods or services as in between these two firms. And that's the reason. This ease of doing business is what we call as freeness of trade. There's nothing called free trade. Free trade absolutely doesn't mean that a buyer is buying goods for free from a supplier. No. So, there are many aspects that is dealt by central governments of all the country. This is supported by the central banks of these countries who jointly see that a country's economy prospers because of healthy trade relations. Pulitzer Prize winner Thomas Friedman, one of the legendary author of many books related to international trade, has found 3 different eras of globalization. He calls globalization 1.0. Well, that falls between 1942 to 1800. He identified that during this era, many powerful countries wanted to dominate by annexing the other countries. And I hope you realize this, that this is a point of time when India was also under the British rule. Spain, Portuguese have always tried to see which nation besides theirs had wealth, in the sense natural minerals, diamonds, copper, all required for prospering economies. And they would invade those countries or maybe topple the rulers and then rule that country. This is what we call as annexing various countries because they wanted resources. And thus they expanded their global presence. And this is what he calls a globalization. After this era, by the end of 1800s to 2000, that is what we know today, there was an emergence of multinational corporations, transnational conglomerates, global corporations. Here, when I say multinationals or global, these firms are registered in some country, but they have presence in several countries. One of the best example I can use in our country is Procter & Gamble, Philips, Starbucks. These are giant corporations. Shell Oil Company, a global company. They have presence in several countries. And the brands of product, let's take a simple brand of shampoo of Procter & Gamble, Head and Shoulders. You can visit any country and find Head and Shoulders. That's the power of a multinational corporation. These corporations, through their unique marketing, branding, advertising, manufacturing, purchase of raw materials, maintaining standard qualities across the world, nations, have changed consumer preferences and also purchase behaviors, which has also happened very much in India. We prefer fast food today. We like to drink beverages like Coca-Cola. And competing products are milk-based products that are purely Indian brands. These are what is pushing for global development. Now what happens after 2000? He called it as globalization 3.0. That is, technology and its seamless interconnectedness drives globalization. And yes, as we see today, our own country's massive success in adoption of UPI interface for payment, FASTag, Aadhaar card, e-commerce for purchase, obtaining smartphones has really changed the way Indians live. Now let's define what is trade. International trade are economic transactions that are made between countries. Some other definitions in the academic literature says a trade is an exchange involving a good or a service between two different countries. Many students understand that countries trade. Basically, these are businesses or firms inside a country that trade with businesses and firms in other countries. The exchanges is known as imports or export. Now, what is an import? as we all know, is a very common word. An import refers to good bought into the country. It refers to getting the good inside the country from foreign country. If I buy goods from Maharashtra to Gujarat, well, we don't call it import because Maharashtra and Gujarat are same states within India. An export basically is a good or a service sold to a foreign country. And many databases, whenever you refer to exports and imports, talk about total trade of a nation. A total trade is nothing but the sum of export and import. Now, why international trade has increased? I covered the major aspect of the agreements after the Second World War, but there are many smaller aspects that have fueled trade between nations. Small in size or very large in size, both. First and foremost, governments around the world have recognized that trade and trade alone leads to economic growth and prosperity. That means this recognition came after many incidents like collapse of the Berlin Wall, collapse of the Soviet Union. Why we use these examples? Germany or Soviet Union were very prospering nations, but completely under government control. Many of the business activities was not given to entrepreneurs to perform. So, the definition of a product as best or better was both done by the government themselves. But today, it is not true. After a process of liberalization, or the next point that I have written the word deregulation, is no regulations. That is what we call as deregulations. This has fueled private companies to build better services and products at low cost, at appropriate price for the customers. And competition has increased. And this eventually led many of the companies to look for markets besides their own country or within their own geographical boundaries. And they started exporting. And to facilitate export, government deregulated the financial and transportation sectors. Both are the backbone of international logistics, finance and transportation. The more it is regulated, no matter how good quality product is made by a business firm within a country, it is very difficult to enter any agreement with a foreign country's businesses. So facilitating the free flow of money, labor, capital, and one of the best things that governments do is enter regional agreements. So one of the world's leading regional agreement is what we call as North Atlantic Free Trade Association or NAFTA. This is known as a multilateral agreement, whereas a Bangkok agreement, an agreement between India and Thailand, we call it as bilateral agreement. These are all known as regional integration, when nations, maybe two or more, come together to sign an agreement such that it facilitates many activities required for trade. And one of the major point of agreement in this regional integration is to reduce tariffs. What are tariff? Tariff is a duty levied on import of goods inside the country. So, I want to import the best quality motorcycle inside the country. If the government reduces the import duty, then I will rather want to import it from a foreign country. So, reducing tariff should be carefully looked into because it may affect the local businesses also. However, at the same time, tariff reduction always increase imports. And once one nation reduces the tariff for import of certain goods from a country, the other nation will also reciprocate and reduce the tariffs on certain goods which their country's businesses need. So this facilitates trade. In addition, simplifying trade procedures and providing logistics infrastructure, construction of ports, construction of runways for air, construction of highways, construction of rail networks. These are all required and can only be done by the governments. And banking infrastructure. How much banking has improved in our country, both public sector as well as private sector banks. And how many regulations are eased for these banks to do international transactions. And we can see the effect of it in our country. A booming economy. Differences in factor endowments. Well, the word factor endowments is used in international business, international economics. Factors, endowments are nothing but those. In my language, I would like to define where man has spent very less efforts to do. Well, that may be availability of water, rivers, lakes. It can be availability of rich minerals, metals, undersea minerals, aquatic products, wood. Well, initially, factor endowments related to these things. Later on, it has been expanded into knowledge infrastructure. Is also one of the factor endowments. Like India, if you see, has got so many foreign companies operating in cities like Bangalore. This happened because India was blessed with a good education, universities and colleges at very low fees compared to the foreign countries. And educated graduates are providing good services. For these reasons, many foreign companies set up their operations in India. So, technical know-how, organization skills are also considered today as factor endowments. Further, differences in climatic conditions. Some are extremely hot. They can't grow all the fruits and vegetables that we get in India so easily. So they need to import from countries like India. India needs to import dates, nuts, which is available at a very superior quality, maybe in a Middle Eastern country. So these reasons leads to production and export of certain products with favorable climatic conditions. Companies' ability to produce and transport the goods with fewer inputs of labor and capital has increased trade. Followed by, at a consumption end, the consumers changing preferences and rapid communication has fueled the international trade. Let us look at some raw data obtained from the Government of India's database, the Department of Commerce. All students are encouraged to log on to these sites to see where India stands in world trade. This is a data for year 2021-22, so it is very much current. The values are expressed in dollar denomination and millions of dollars. So when we read the figures, for example, export USA 76111, students need to read it as $76 billion. So let's see how they have ranked. The ranking is based on the total trade, that is export plus import, which is the fifth column from the left. The first country ranked is USA. India exports roughly $76 billion worth of goods to this country, and at the same time they import 43 billion worth of goods, bringing the total trade to $119 billion. Next to it is something known as trade balance, that is roughly 32 billion. Now, the amount in front of you is talking about the difference between export and imports. If it's a positive sign, then we say India has a surplus, that is trade surplus. Well, let us look at the second country, that is People's Republic of China. With China, we are exporting roughly 21 billion and importing 94 billion. That means we buy more from China than what we sell. The total trade value is also very encouraging, but however, it is a negative 72 billion. That means in this case, we call it a trade deficit. Third country, which is one of the largest trading partners of India, is United Arab Emirates. Normally, we know these countries by their provinces or emirates, known as Dubai or Abu Dhabi, Sharjah, Ajman, Fujairah, Ras Al Khaimah, etc. We have with this country a trade deficit of almost $16 billion. This is followed by Saudi Arabia, and an interesting country is Iraq. Well, with Iraq we are exporting a very less value, that is 2 billion, whereas importing 31 billion. By looking at these figures, you might have understood our trade partners are from the beginning, from the start, is US, China, UAE, Saudi and other countries. Not that we don't deal with other countries, but however, the total trade is much lesser than that. Although this figure looks not very encouraging, India has still many miles to go in establishing its supremacy as a nation with a very healthy international trade figures. Well, most of the goods that India deals with are predominantly machinery, electronics, automobile parts, and fuels, chemicals, well, diamonds, precious stones, pharmaceuticals, etc. India's share in the global exports is 3.5% compared to all the countries that export. India only export 3.5%, and the import is also 3.2%. So, with this, let's understand what are the effects of trade. The effects of trade try to divide into effects of export and import. What happens to an economy? Well, India too. Increase in exports compared to imports, please keep that in mind, is reduction of trade deficit. Exports creates jobs because company, when they manufacture the goods and sell locally, eventually they start selling internationally, that is offshore or overseas, foreign markets. Then the demand for their products increase. For this reason, they need to produce more. And when they want to produce more, they need to buy machines, purchase raw materials, more. And for that, they need to hire more people to run those machines for marketing purpose, for accounting purpose, for finance purpose. That creates jobs. Firms achieve economies of scale. Well, economies of scale is lowering of the unit cost of production when the volumes of production increase. Of course, when demand for your product increases, and you produce more, the unit cost of producing one product always goes down. That's the behavior of the cost. So lower cost, if the company wants to maintain the same price without reducing the price, will lead to inflated profits. It broadens the market reach and serves customers abroad. Firm benefits from market diversification. That is very important. A company that makes the same products and sell to the same people will not have any incentive for innovation, trying something new. Whereas, when you diversify market, that means when you find a new market or a new segment or a new group of people, they may have different needs and demands. They may look for certain new features in the products, new way to use a utility, new color, new shape, new design, new effects in the products. And that's what makes a company make or do some innovative things on the product. It contributes to a very, very important point, foreign exchange or foreign currency. So whenever a company manufactures in India and exports to a foreign country, the customer in that country will receive the goods and make the payment. As I told you, the world's most accepted currency is US dollar denomination. So the payment he makes in US dollars, it comes to our country in this denomination. Of course, people who export the goods from our country cannot use US dollars to buy anything in the domestic markets. So they need to convert into the Indian rupees, which is our local currency. But who holds the dollar then? That is the central bank. So foreign exchange, foreign currency is very important. Why? Because this US dollars, which we call as reserves, is used to import necessary items, which is like petroleum oil. Overall increase in the domestic economic activity, and firms consider the risk of exports such as war, terrorism, economic downturns, etc. when they decide to go for export business. On the same lines, the increase in import compared to export will fuel trade deficit. And when more goods come from foreign country to the domestic markets, the manufacturers of equivalent products in the domestic markets will start feeling the heat. Competition. And because of this competition, they need to gear up. They may look at the cost angle, trying to reduce the unit cost of manufacturing, transportation, or they may look at making their products more innovative and rather increasing the price. Consumers in domestic market now receive more choices. So today you want to buy a shampoo. When you go to a retail store, it may be a mom and pop store or a mall, a superstore, supermarket, discount store. You find so many different brands of shampoos, different countries, naturals, chemical based, in different packaging size, right from 1 gram, that is a sachet, up till 250 to 400 to 500 grams. You will find. Newer business domains like sourcing emerge. Yes, when import is done because of requirement of raw materials, there will be companies that will facilitate import of certain quality at certain cost. And these are known as sourcing companies. So new business domains emerge. Firms consider the risk of imports also, so that disruption and damage. Let's see how trade has affected the Indian economy. International trade has improved the economic growth, increased the employment, provided varieties of products, increased the disposable income of many individuals, and it has also increased the GDP. Please understand, when GDP is calculated, the international trade aspect is one of the major component. So, as we know, GDP is nothing but a sum of consumption, government expenditures, investment, and finally net exports. So it is basically export minus imports. So when these figures are put together and added, that is your GDP. That is one of the methods to calculate GDP. This has also increased the per capita income. All you may know that at this point of time, per capita income is nothing but GDP looked at from one person's point of view, that is divided by the population. It is one of the major metric that is used to compare prosperity of the world economies. However, that's not the only one, but that's an important one. Consumers get access to variety of goods. Yes, all of us have done that, got that. We have different brands of motorcycles, different channels in TV to watch, different FMCG products, soaps, shampoos, perfumes, deodorants, and many others. It required commodities, goods and services, has improved our standard of living. It has given an entry strategy for companies with low risk and low cost, definitely. Why it became a low risk? Well, always many entrepreneurs believe that export is very high risk. Not true. We'll be looking into why it becomes a low risk and also low cost alternative. It gives opportunity to several small and medium-sized industries. We normally call them MSMEs, micro, small, medium enterprises. Today, many MSMEs, small firms, very small size firms, are manufacturing goods for exports. They may or may not have their own export divisions, but they are manufacturing products for foreign markets, and they realize their proceeds, the money, in foreign currency denomination. Now let's see how firms develop international markets. Normally they start doing business in domestic market. They manufacture the goods, they identify the customers, price the goods, and through domestic transportation, logistics, they reach the goods directly to the customer or through the retail. They try to sell the goods. Well, over a period of time, if the goods are acceptable, customers like the product, prefer the price in which he is selling or she is selling the product, then they can produce more and sell more. So they gradually expand and over time explore other market opportunities. At this time, they employ different methods. Initially, when a firm starts exporting or enters this field of business, they may not have this expertise, because selling in a foreign market requires a lot of procedures, documents, and there are too many players in between, mandatory, which the company needs to understand first. It is not so easy as manufacturing and selling the goods in a domestic market. Please understand, domestic markets are not very easy or simple. When I use the words ease or simple, I am talking always related to international markets. Selling in domestic markets is equally difficult. I agree with that. So they have to employ various methods to identify their customers. How do you identify your customers? I can travel from Bombay to Chennai and look for a customer in Chennai. But how do I know how many customers are available in Argentina or Brazil or Finland? So the best place is I rather attend a trade show which brings together buyers, suppliers, middlemen, raw material suppliers of different countries on a single platform, and thereby I trigger the process of business dealings with these firms. Or there are experts known as export-import agents who have a good profile and also contacts of several customers, of course in the same line of business. And the third method is they can personally take a trip abroad to meet the customer. Of course, to go to a foreign country for business purpose, there are procedures. You need to have a person in a foreign country, maybe you can call him an agent or a buyer, who can help you through this process. There are issues related to obtaining a visa to enter a foreign country, and then understand the currency relations, whether it's a weak currency or a strong currency, understand the competition in a foreign country, and relationship with buyers are very important. So, taking personally a trip abroad for an export or import business requires time, and it's always advisable to use a middleman initially in this business. Now, once through whatever method the customers are identified, companies come together to discuss the terms of agreement, terms of sale, terms of payment, lead time, shipment time, and many details, finally arrive at an amicable agreement in terms of price, quantity, delivery, and execute the order. Once the products are produced, the firms have different options. Well, most of these are negotiated or discussed before signing the deal. However, we need to understand how companies, when they want to enter a foreign market, take a calibrated steps towards becoming a full-fledged international or a multinational company. The first and foremost is they can export directly. When I say they export directly means what? These companies have their own export divisions. An export division consists of specialized people in international business. Marketing managers would know the procedures, guidelines, regulations of dealing with foreign markets. Then we must have a shipping department which understands the documentation, procedures for shipment, negotiating prices for logistics. Then we must have warehouse and packaging team who understands the requirement of packaging in international logistics. There are certain customs requirement, there will be certain buyers requirement. It may not be same all the time the way we do it in domestic markets. So whether we take marketing or shipping or packaging and warehouse followed by finance managers, they now have to deal with foreign currency. They must have the tip on the foreign exchange rates and conduct a lot of background activities like buying and selling currencies whenever the need requires. So here we have an entire team of dedicated personnel only for this new market, a diversified market of that company, that is foreign markets. So to build such a organization structure requires time. So other alternatives are available for the company, which is they can sell to a local firm, and that local firm which is having an expertise of exports and other documentation procedures will take up the matter. Or they can use the services of EMC, which is export management companies or export trading companies. We'll discuss both export management companies and export trading companies shortly. Let's see What are the role of the intermediary in international markets? Market intermediaries are basically specialists. That's why it is advisable to use the services of these people. A company that manufactures the goods domestically is an expert in manufacturing the goods, the product, its technical specification, providing after-sales service, usage of raw material, composition of it, repairing, maintaining it. But they may not understand which customer in a foreign market will use their product. In the sense, why would a customer in a foreign market buy a product is not the same reason why customers in domestic markets may be buying. It may be true in some cases, especially in consumer markets. So, market intermediaries are specialists. They understand consumer behavior of foreign buyers very well. And they are the best people. Based on the quality of the product that is manufactured locally, they will identify the right buyers and advise the company, manufacturing company in a domestic market with the right pricing strategy also and the quality requirements. These intermediaries have offices not just in this country but in several countries, especially the major cities. If you are looking at textile, yarns, then we can always contact a trading company in Mumbai who will be having partners or offices maybe in Hong Kong, maybe in Dubai, maybe in US, maybe in other countries, in cities in China, in Vietnam, etc. So these offices around their world are providing proper inputs in terms of the trend, what is the quality requirements, how it has changed, how customer preferences change, how customers are seeing the price of the product now. Are they prepared to pay a high price, or because of domestic competition in their own country, the prices they demand has gone down? So the quality preferences change over a period of time. So that's why we say there is nothing called a best quality, because any better things come out of the best, the customer preferences will always change. Pricing and other competitive conditions in the market they operate. So this is very essential to understand, because many of the issues related to point number 3 is taken in the sense it is understood by a domestic manufacturer selling in a domestic market. Well, it is his daily routine or daily job to keep a hand on all the knowledge required to sell the products locally. But when we go to international market or markets, several countries, then to have a hang of or to get a knowledge of all these parameters across all these countries, it's take a lot of time, and there are room for a lot of errors in judging the customers' requirements and the competition prevailing in those countries. So some intermediaries provide these vital information for the manufacturer, and they also offer their personal contacts like potential buyers in a foreign country, and of course they all do these services for a commission on the total invoice value of the goods shipped. So we have 2 key intermediaries. We call them export management companies and trading companies. Well, there are 2 activities happening in intermediaries. One is taking title of the goods, and another is possession of the goods. These middlemen can take possession of the goods without taking the title of the goods, or they take the title of the goods, take the goods in their own name, and then ship it in their own name also. Based on which export management companies, the activities of these companies are blurred today. One was doing export management, started trading, and trading vice versa has gone to export management. But however, Taking title to goods and operating internationally on their own account is the job of export management companies. Export management companies are not just mere traders. Okay, they have immense information about many important aspects of international business. They know the government guidelines, regulations, customs regulations, norms, shipping regulations, okay, and also customer preferences. A trading company may not have that big expertise because it is with few people, and they gather, evaluate and translate market information. They have more information about the customers, their preferences and their purchase behaviors, etc., what they like, what they dislike more, and that they turn into a business opportunity. So they may take, that's why I wrote the word may, possession of the goods, and they normally deal with vast volumes because they make a meager commission. Some traders work on 1% commission or 2% commission. So 2% commission on like $1,000 is negligible for him. So he looks for volume transaction, maybe $50,000, $100,000 should be, is quite voluminous. 1% commission will help him make better profits. So as we end this session, let us see what the OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, a group of very powerful, economically powerful countries in the world, and World Trade Organizations have defined a connection between transport and logistics and national development in international trade. So all these are interconnected. So this, under appropriate circumstances, delivers several other beneficial economic and social outcomes. So connectedness of transportation and logistics in international trade leads to national development. So with this, we finish the first part of your Unit 5.